It is the technology show where we translate geek into regular speak, and I'm not on my own this week. I have Ollie joining me. Hey, Oliver. Oliver, do you say Weidlich or Weidlich? How do
It's
you pronounce
Weidlich. It's Weidlich
Weidlich?
correctly. It's a
Okay,
German name.
there we go. So, Ollie is the director of design and innovation at Mobile Experience. In fact, I even made you a ticker. Look at that, mate. There, all the way
Oh
along the bottom of the
wow,
screen.
that is fancy. Yeah, yeah. Wasn't expecting that level of show quality.
Oh, well, I pay for the app. I might as well use it, right? So use some of the banners where I can. As always, the show is sponsored by Alcatel. Thanks, guys. And in fact, I even have a ticker for that. Look, I'll take your one off and I can put it on there. But I thought
Wow.
today's really going to be a fun day. So Ollie and I were chatting a couple of weeks back. I think kick off about what mobile experience is as a company, and that will probably be a great caveat into why we're talking today.
Yeah, sure. So my background's originally in psychology and understanding human-computer interaction, and I got into this about specifically user experience about 20 years ago now, and then had a first sort of phase of that of working with an agency and then going out on my own. For the last 10 years, me and my great team have been mobile experience. So we specialize in user experience, the research with customers out there in the field, understanding what they want and their needs and behaviors more critically. And then the strategy piece, so around mobile platforms or voice systems or TV or in-car stuff, whatever that might be. And then the design aspect as well of the user experience design. So we don't do any development, all focused on the people side of that.
Yeah, and I think for all the people that know me, I love playing on the hardware side and seeing the stuff actually get built. So it was definitely a conversation that was going to lead to another one. Well, here we are online, and of course, in this modern day and age, when people need a chat, we seem to have to go online to do so, including my
Yeah.
mate Chris. Chris Edwards has just reached out or typed on LinkedIn, nice haircut. Thank you. I'm glad you approved. Not as fancy as his, but thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, mate. So, what I wanted to chat to you about now, I know you subscribe to all my shows, Ollie, and you've never missed an episode. But for
Of
those that
course, of
don't,
course.
I always start off with the app of the week, and then I talk about a bit of tech news, and then I land up talking about, I land up at a phone 9 times out of 10. I am going to do a shameless punt. I made myself another little ticker. So my app of the week
Mm.
normally is all about the UI or the UX or ultimately what it does for you. Those are the reasons I choose an app. Um, Over the years, I have done things like web apps or just websites. Last week was about the know your alcohol limits. It was a very cool little UI that they had on their
Yeah, that
website
was a
to
good one.
show what a standard drink looks like. And
Mm.
um, but as I said, I'm going to just do a shameless punt. And I'm making the app of the week Kazoik this week. And there's a multiple
Hey.
reasons for it. Now, being an expert in UI and UX, I hope you don't go through it with a fine tooth comb and destroy it.
Well, as you
I was
know,
very
I've already been on it. I've had fun with it.
well.
But
That's why I did it.
continue.
So basically, I never built a full-blown native app. But I realized the importance of mobile mobility, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and the evolution of the tech. So I've wrapped the website into a canister, for lack of a better description. And the single
Hmm.
reason for doing it was to give me push notification. And so that
Yeah,
way I
yeah.
could remind people that Kazoik is coming. So for all of those people that don't know what Kazoik is, it is my new startup. I've been plodding along at it painfully now for the last couple of months. It's five-minute auctions that happen, in fact, tonight, Australian Eastern Standard Time at 8 o'clock. Our app finally got through Apple's approval process, which, Ali, as you know, is not always the easiest thing.
Can be tricky.
Um, it can be tricky. I did have to beg and plead. I did get a rejection. But Alcatel, who sponsors our show, is made by a company called TCL, and
Hmm.
they've very kindly come on board to give away a brand new TCL 10 Pro, which is nearly an $800, or it is an $800 cell phone. So just download the
Nice.
app. I am going to be changing quite a few things over the next few days, but this was a chance having a fellow mobilist on air with me to punt it. So yeah, Kazoik on Google and Apple Store. So Chris now said, can we dig into the evolution of progressive web apps and why they may be better than
Jeez.
native apps?
He's a bit of
We've got
a taskmaster, isn't he?
Yes. Well, Ollie, I think you know Chris, don't you?
Yes, we
From
caught up last
Soldier, of course.
Friday.
Yeah. So
We've
there
had
we
the
go.
opportunity of knowing each other for many years, probably about, I don't know, 15 years or something.
Well, should we kick off on his question? I mean, I think it may be fast forward. We can do a Quentin Tarantino. We start with PWAs, and then we go back to where this all started. 20. Well, you said 21 years ago. I worked out for me it's 25 years ago.
Wow.
My first phone. So
Clearly
yeah,
you're more mature and so on than I am.
I don't know about mature, but old, yes.
So
Chris,
PWAs,
yeah.
we want to start with
Uh,
that?
Yeah, let's start with the PWA. So I think for all those that are listening, and I generally don't get into too many technical things. A progressive web app is, as it sounds, instead of going through the whole pain point of building an app, you can build a website that then lives and breathes online like a normal website would, and you encourage people to save a shortcut onto their phone, and that way they can access it like they would in app with a little icon. But I think the main thing with the PWA is the ability to have push notification. I think that's what the holy grail is there.
Well,
Your side?
it's this lovely middle ground of sort of being as accessible as a website on, so anyone can access it really easily. You don't have to go to the store, uh, but it can increase its functionality and have a deeper, richer functionality. One of which, obviously, you talked about in terms of notifications and so on, so that it does have a richer set of functionality than a normal website.
Yeah. So hopefully, Chris, that answers it for you. I am going to say
And
that
app clips
although,
on iOS is coming out as well. So it's certainly not a PWA properly, but it's
yeah,
sort of this middle ground of how do we get a stepping stone for people from the web to do something quite quickly and simply, and then potentially push them to the full app experience. So it'll
and
be
I
interesting
and
to
that's
see how that
that's the
pans
thing
out
that
with
I wanted
iOS
to
14.
to jump in as well is that I'm still a fan of an app. I still think that apps we need apps. It does a lot for the experience point of view. It also does a lot from the processing point of view. That a lot of the data that doesn't change can sit on the phone. Um, the only reason people don't go down that full route is that it is hard. It can, if you're not working with a partner like yourselves, that get it designed right, and then more important, or not more importantly so, but equally importantly, have someone that actually knows how to build it. Because building a
Mhm.
bad app, even if you started with a good design, it's a bad app. It doesn't
That's
work. It
right.
has bugs. Um, but I think we're still quite a far way away from PWAs becoming mainstream. There's still a lot of work, and the people I've spoken to have either stuck to a website or gone to an app. It's that kind of .mobi era all over again.
Yeah, one of the trickier aspects I think that's been not holding them back, but if you don't have a level playing field in terms of the PWA functionality on both Android and iOS, there's sort of less of a push. So it'll be interesting. And iOS hasn't fully adopted all the aspects of progressive web apps. So it's sort of this bit where there's some good opportunities to do PWAs, but they're mainly focused on the Android platform, whereas iOS, again, it'll be interesting with iOS 14 and their web clips of whether that sort of brings them around or whether it actually pushes them further apart. So we'll yet to see what happens there.
So let's geek out. Let's talk hardware and maybe oldware. We actually have to come up with a new terminology. So I think for the listeners and the viewers, when
Vintage.
when you and I were, I think we had a Zoom call. I didn't get the luxury of coming into the office, but I was fixated on your background. There was this shelf of really cool, original, old, whichever word, vintage cell phones. I have a great collection that I had to get rid of most of them when I moved over from South Africa. But if you'd ever walked into
Mhm.
my office in South Africa, I had shelves dedicated to these things. So yeah, I know you've actually put some nice images up in your background. You've got that screen all
Yeah,
ready to
let
go. I'm
me
going to see if
get
I can
that.
shrink this down a bit and give us a little bit of
Hit
space
that.
there. Let's try.
Okay, so what I thought it'd be fun would be to have a look through, I suppose, the history of some of these devices. And I suppose I'm coming from a very personal perspective in that regard. So this is my first one. This is the Nokia 3810 that I think probably I got in 88, 89. Was it? Sorry, 98, 99 as a hand-me-down from my mum. And it was one of those classic phones that did the job very well. It was very simple, and I think it got launched in about 97. You go even further, Brett. What was your first one?
Mine was the HB160. Now, here's the funny part. It was made by Alcatel, who sponsors the show. I mean, talk about, and in fact, when I spoke to Alcatel for the first time about coming on board as my show sponsor and just reaching out to them generally, do some work with them, I said to them, that was my first phone. I actually must find a picture of it, but it had an hour battery life. It had an extendable aerial that you had to walk around doing this to try and find signal, a little green screen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 3810 that you've got on the screen, I had the predecessor, which was the 3110.
Yeah.
And the most important thing about, well, there were two most important things. One, it put Nokia on the map. It made Nokia what Nokia is, and opened up the doors for the 21s to, to see out their legacy. But it had
Mm-hmm.
Snake. Now, for anyone that's never played
Yeah.
Snake,
Yep.
they have not lived. There's just no living if you haven't played Snake, which was the little mobile game. I'm not going to tell people; they need to go find it. So, what else have you got for us on your picture history?
Well, the next one I've got it was, where are we? There we go. I've got the screen over there. There we go. It was the SH888, and at this stage, I think I was coming down to Sydney. I was going to uni in Newcastle and living on the Central Coast, and I was coming down to Sydney. I remember I had a PowerBook, an Apple PowerBook, and I would have used the infrared port on the SH888 to infrared to my PowerBook to get my little bits of email and my little websites
Yep.
in late '99, early 2000. So that was the particular reason I got this device, because it could do data over infrared, and that was its huge benefit, I suppose.
Do you remember which movie that phone became famous from?
Oh no, no. It wasn't a Bond one, was it? Was it Bond?
No, no, close, but not. It was the
It was
Saint.
no. I think.
The Saint
Oh
used that
really?
that phone. Yeah, the Ericsson was inside the Saint. In fact, I think that was probably one of the reasons I looked at getting it. Later
Yep.
on in life, he moved to the Nokia communicator. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was when Val Kilmer was the Saint, but
Yeah.
that little phone featured in the Saint as well.
And this was before the whole Sony Ericsson thing. And then this was one of the devices I had to play around with at the time. I was doing a fair bit of work with Three, the mobile telco here in Australia. That were the first 3G telco here in Australia way back when, that launched in 2003. And this was my test device with them, where we really started to get some rich mobile content and so on via the browser on this device. So it was a good one. And that's one of the outcomes, obviously, of Sony doing a joint venture with Ericsson and creating this whole brand of devices.
I didn't have that one of the flips when I was looking at the picture earlier. I thought I did. I got a bit confused on the liquid Sony Ericsson logo. In fact, I never really owned flip phones. My wife was a huge fan of the flip
Mm-hmm.
phone from the original V, which then became the Razor, the Motorola
Yeah,
Razor.
yeah,
But it started off as the V100, I think, with the battery pack on the top. So when the flip was closed, the battery pack was on the top for quick release. And then in the old days, we all had charging stations with extra batteries that you could hot swap. Um,
nice.
I don't know if that specific device did, but even on my Alcatel,
No,
I had a big desktop unit with a spare slot for the battery at the back, so that was charging, so I could take it out and swap my batteries around. But the flip phone never really appealed to me. I liked having the biggest screen that you would get from the full phone back then, like the Nokia 2110s and the 7100s. And right,
and
what's
it's
next on our
hilarious.
journey?
It's hilarious the size of the screen now compared to the size of the device.
I know it's
That
insane.
whole balance is way up. What else have we got? We had. Oh, I don't think I put it in, but I had an iMode as well. That was testing iMode stuff on way back in the day as well. Palm for me was one of those key devices.
Yep.
The graffiti handwriting input. This one actually supported in Australia. We had a cradle called. It was made by a third party, and it was called a dot WAP cradle, I think, from memory, or dot Neo, I think it might have been actually. And you would slide the Palm VX into it, and you would get email on your Palm Pilot. And I remember sitting in the park going, "Oh, this is life changing. I can go and do work in the park and not miss important emails and things like that." It was hilarious.
So I tried Palm. I didn't do so well with Palm. I then moved on to Hewlett Packard made something called the Trio, and I think the two
Oh
actually
yeah,
aligned. But I
yeah,
went Scion, which was the British
yeah,
version of Palm, and it was actually the early of the clams. Now with the
yeah.
Scion, you got
Psalm
all these
5, was it?
accessories. Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
You got all these accessories like a Ethernet cable adapter. As a Mac owner, I'm still carrying cable adapters around with me. Um, you got a printer cable adapter, a SCSI. It was a SCSI port printer cable adapter. You got a screen share, and it ran on Lotus Notes. That was or
Yeah,
Lotus
wow.
Suite. It had the whole Lotus, which was the equivalent of Word, and it was incredible. And I carried this thing everywhere. The
Yeah.
big pouch on the side of my belt, you know.
Yeah, right.
But Palm, yeah, I didn't do Palm. I found the screen was too small. Again, I've always liked the bigger screen or full screen experience, which it did have in its day. But the Sun with the keyboard, which takes me into my love affair with BlackBerry. I don't know if you've got Blackberries are popping up in your Prezzo, but we'll talk about that later.
I did have them. I did have them because that was sort of the next step after having this was going to
Yeah.
the BlackBerry, and I had the blue one. I forget what the model number was actually, but I didn't get the earliest one. I got that one. It was sort of more like a consumer version of the BlackBerry compared to Black
So
Series Enterprise version.
I still have a BlackBerry today. I have the Key 2, which is the latest one, which runs on Android and still has a keyboard. I've always loved BlackBerry. I've always had it as a second phone. Incidentally, it's made by TCL as well. So TCL makes TCL phones, Alcatel, and BlackBerry. Um, but for me, BlackBerry was amazing. The one that I didn't enjoy was one little round ball. They had this ball that kept getting full of lint from your pocket, and that you had to keep popping the ball out and changing it or
Yeah,
using a
right.
cotton bud with alcohol. But BlackBerry was incredible. And if you think about BBM and what that did, you know, that was the messaging app that everyone used. BlackBerry became cool, you know. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, that's where a lot of that mobile messaging really sort of got a lot of strength in business, in enterprise. Was, well, it was nicknamed the Crackberry, right? Like everybody was
yeah,
always on it,
yeah.
banging away.
Okay, I just got another message come through in chat saying, "What do we think about the stylus being brought back into the market?" I mean, that stems from your palm. The one in your picture had a stylus. It's a great
Yeah,
question. Aria Sternberg, I'll give a shout out to him, and Chris actually knows Aria as well. He's a massive fan of the Note, the Samsung Note.
hmm
Swears by the stylus. Um, I like the stylus. I think the stylus is great.
I'm a big. I've got the iPad and the iPad Pro with the pencil, and
Yep.
it's quite interesting because I've been going through this phase. One of the things I'm doing at the moment is looking at the workflow of a tablet device and how your interaction with it changes and your engagement and the types of tasks you can do. And I've actually got the tablet in 5 setups. So I use the tablet by itself, just as a tablet. I use the tablet with the Apple Pencil, which can obviously navigate if you wanted to, but also sketch and write notes. And with iOS 14, for iPad OS 14, I should say, it's got Scribble now, so it's interpreting the handwriting. So that's really good. So then that's the tablet and the pencil. So that's number 2. Then I've got the tablet plus the Bridge keyboard, which makes it sort of into a laptop. Then I've got the tablet plus the Apple Magic keyboard, which sort of turns it into a dock more than a laptop. And then I've got a stand with the tablet and a spare Bridge keyboard next to it, and the Magic trackpad as well. So I've got that next to me, sort of as another computer, as well as my laptop, as well as my iMac. So it's really interesting, the tablet form factor and how it can change through a whole for very different purposes. And I think that stylus one for me is something that's very comfortable sitting on the couch or sitting out and just taking quick notes or doing quick sketches. And I really like the stylus. The thing with the Apple one is obviously it's magnetic, but you still sort of, I liked the aspect of the Palm 5 where you could stash it away down the side. Yeah, that was a great element to it, which I believe you can do with the Note too. Yeah, the Note sort
Note
of
goes
stashed to one
inside.
side.
Correct,
Yeah.
it goes inside. I had the very first Samsung Note that ever came out.
Mhm.
Be quite interesting to take the new 20 for a test drive. I think that's the model number, is the new Note 20. But for me, I agree. To be able to sit there and do a scribble feature, and I'm so glad you brought up iOS or iPad 14.
Mhm.
The one thing that's been lacking for me, or the reason I haven't actually bought an Apple Pencil, I use an iPad. I love my iPad, but I haven't found. I'm not an artist, so I don't draw. I don't sketch those type of things. But for me, if you're talking about Scribble, which is the new update that's come out, that I could bring up a blank piece of paper, inverted commas, and scribble and have hand recognition, I use a notebook with a pen that does the same thing. So I write in the notebook, and then via my phone it transposes it into a digital copy, and then
Mhm.
OCRs it into text recognition.
Mhm.
Um, that's what I've been doing at the moment because I haven't had the right app to do it on my iPad. So I'm looking very forward to the update in that sense. Once it's commercially available, not beta. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll probably get
It,
a
it's
pencil then.
it's really interesting because I've been playing around also with you can get a keyboard. So when you hit an input field on an iPad, the keyboard pops up at the bottom. Well, you can get ones that actually give you a handwriting section at the bottom. And it's kind of interesting because playing around with those and the recognition's pretty good on those. But that difference with Scribble of actually writing where the field is rather than a separate input field is really interesting. And I think there are pros and cons to it because sometimes you can just write and it's really simple and easy. Other times it's almost a bit too fiddly, and I'd prefer to just be writing in the one place all the time, especially because of the device rather than going up and down it. But it's going to be interesting to see how people adopt it and integrate it into their workflow.
100%. And that's the other thing I mentioned Aria earlier. I'm an Apple user. He's always been an Android Microsoft user. So you can imagine the discussions, and we're business partners. But he would always come to me with his Surface. He used the Windows Surface computer and say,
Yep.
Brett, you need to sign this document. Here's the pen. You can sign on the screen. You don't have to print it out, scan it, bring it back. And I couldn't argue with that. So, and trying to use your finger doesn't work. Steve Jobs
Yeah.
was wrong when it came to that. He was. He was right about a lot of things, but he was wrong. This is not a stylus. I can't write neatly with this. There's lots of things I can do with this, or maybe one finger to the right, but I can't sign a document or write a note with my finger. So, you need something. You do need a pencil if it's Apple, or a stylus if it's a device. Um, I think there's a long way
Speaking
to
of
go, though.
Microsoft, I think the really interesting thing that's come out lately is obviously the Surface Duo, the two screen device that Microsoft
Yeah.
have
Well, you
announced and
saw.
have released a preview.
Did you see the price of the Samsung Fold round two, version two? I think they launched JB Hi-Fi, I think, is doing the pre-orders at 3 grand. Um,
Wow.
it's it's a big whack for a device. I mean, it looks like a great toy, but 3 grand it's serious money.
Yeah,
It's a big chunk of change.
especially if, I mean, they've had a couple of issues with the technology in the past. It'll be interesting, but it sort of, that one feels like it's looking for a use case a bit still rather than
Yeah.
the Microsoft hardware looks really, like the thinness is nice. I think one of the things I really like about it is they seem to be in the materials that they've done for the launch event. They seem to be really honest about the fact that it is two screens, but how those two screens work together from an interaction perspective, I think is really fascinating. So I think it's going to be that everybody like MKBHD and everyone has been showing off the hardware, but nobody's allowed to showcase the software, I think, yet. So that must be coming up soon, but maybe they're waiting for an update to the software before they show it off publicly.
Well, I got a question that just came through now saying, imagine if Apple's answer to the Samsung was a fold where you could use Parallels or Boot Camp, one side iOS, one side when we joke, but that would be incredible running two OSs. And I mean, if you've ever taken an Android device and done a routing on it, put in your own boot directory, even an old PC or Chromebook and done the same thing, it is quite fun to run two different UIs on the same device. That to me, one of the other questions that came through was, what comes next? Is it UX, UI, or voice in the design side? I think multi-operating systems would be something that would have to happen. I mean, my 14-year-old said to me the other day, like, Dad, why can't PlayStation and Xbox just get together and make a decent console? That was his words, instead of
Millions and
one big
millions of
menace.
dollars probably is the answer, but yes.
I tried to explain that that didn't work. He was like, but I want to just buy one. But imagine if you got one device that would let you run any OS you want or a combination of OSs, because Windows does do certain things better than Apple. Hope this is not being recorded because I would never admit that again. But there are certain tools that you need a Windows machine for. Equally, when it comes to design and animation, you need an Apple. I think portable devices for us as just normal people should give you that freedom. And if Apple would ever let iOS leave the holy grail of their hardware, I think we'd see some very interesting
I,
developments.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that one, I think.
No, I
And I
won't
think
either, mate.
what's interesting is that obviously the Mac's been able to run, because it's been based on Intel, has been able to run Boot Camp and run Windows. But now that they're obviously moving back to Apple Silicon, or moving to Apple Silicon, I should say, what that'll mean for running Windows on those Apple Silicon devices, whether they'll use a Windows port to ARM or not, that'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of
It's going to be
hypervisor
interesting.
stuff being talked about, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to Windows itself.
Cool. What else have we got in that wonderful wall
Should
of
we go back to
old
device?
memory?
A couple
Yeah.
more.
Oh, we lost you there. Ali? We got you. No, you're gone. You're back.
Am I there?
You're there. There's the
Okay.
Apple.
Sorry.
Yeah.
This was my first iPhone. So this was, I think, it launched in June 2007, and a good friend of mine, Dee, who's at YouTube, a design director at YouTube. She was in the States, and so she shipped me one over, and so I think I got mine a couple of months later. But that was obviously a big game changer for the mobile industry. And at the time, we had the mobile industry group, and we were running Mobile Monday, and there was a lot of camaraderie within the mobile industry here in Australia, and so it was fascinating the iPhone appear. Not only globally, but then obviously in the local market the year after. So it took quite a bit of time to get to Australia. We didn't get it till the 3G. And then to see how that then impacted the whole mobile industry and content creation, and even the way the publisher model, right? Because prior to that, it had been the telcos dictating a lot of that. Then it was the publishers, 9MSN, Yahoo, etc., and then it really sort of opened it up. First, obviously, with websites, with mobile websites, and then obviously to apps once the App Store launched.
So my journey with Apple was quite exciting as well. In South Africa, we didn't get the iPhone until iPhone 4, as it so happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now I got the first one. Same, I got it sent over. There was a huge black market for them, and I don't know if you remember this. With your first one, you had to put an AT&T SIM card in it that was in the box, and register it to get it unlocked as such. So my very first iPhone was jailbroken. I had to jailbreak my
Cydia?
my first iPhone.
Cydia?
Yeah, using Cydia.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. But my love affair for the iPhone started within a day of holding that. Now, one of the questions that came through earlier was UX and UI. It didn't even have SMS. And in fact, the 3G, the one that you talked about that officially launched in Australia, didn't have MMS. And yet these were the most sought after mobile devices that people wanted. And they did maybe 30% of what other phones could do. It was crazy how this phone just revolutionized everything, and it was missing so much. But it was, well, I think if I remember, you had a screen that was showing some of the different icons in that
Where
as well.
yeah. So let me just come down to here. So this was the
Yeah.
original, or the way that I had it. So we had the default apps, which were the SMS and the calendar and the photos and the camera and the Maps app that Google made at the time. And then there were all these websites that you could obviously add to the home screen. So it was a very, and then back in those days, like you can see, I only had two screens of apps. Now I think I've got over a
Yeah.
thousand apps running on my iPhone. And that lower resolution, obviously, they were smaller devices. The screen was lower res. We hadn't got to Retina screens yet. That came with obviously iPhone 4, and they were lovely devices, but they really changed the way that people interacted with mobile content and mobile services. Again, it was very much moving from a model of being dictated to, of what tended to be put on phones by default, and that you could then control whatever you wanted. You could move them around. You couldn't delete the Apple ones at the time. You had to move them to another screen, but they didn't have to be on the front screen. You could move
Yeah.
them around. You could get the content that you wanted. You could link straight to websites. All of that sort of stuff really changed this relationship. And I think the other key thing was obviously the actually making a phone call just became another app. It wasn't
Oh,
this thing that the whole phone was dedicated to. It was just something other that you could do with it, and that
that's
changed
why I called
that
today's
whole
show, and it
internet in your
makes
pocket
calls.
perspective.
I mean,
Yeah,
people have forgotten that a phone is actually to make phone calls. We don't use them for that anymore. And even if we do, it's on a
yeah,
wireless headset or. Um, but if I look at the pictures that you've got in the background, and I'm not being biased, and I'm very open about the fact that I'm a fanboy. But if I look at those
Mhm.
little icons or widgets, however you want to call them back then, if you take some of the, let's call them no-name brand Android devices out there, that still looks
Mhm.
better 13 years ago than what we're seeing today on some of the latest Android phone or Android 10 devices or Android 7, whatever. They
Sure.
just nailed it. They just made you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to pick up a phone and use it. And I think that is what Apple is still all about. It's just that.
Mhm.
So to the
Yeah, it's
question
that
earlier
user
about the UI
experience.
UX, it's where it starts. When you pick up the device and it turns on and it just makes you feel warm and fuzzy, it's done. You're there.
They came very much from a consumer perspective rather than the handset manufacturers and the telcos and those large organizations. It was fascinating. I was over at Nokia in 2006, I think, for mobile HCI, and that was obviously a year before the iPhone was announced. And it was fascinating to go into Nokia and to see, the range of devices that they had, with things like the N series devices, right through to the lower end devices, but there was no strategic direction across the whole of product, and it was
Yeah.
like this bits of the organization over there, bits of the organization doing this thing, pushing with that thing. And it just wasn't a cohesive experience. And then for Apple to bring out this device that was far more under the consumer's control than any other mobile device had been before, was this internet focused device. Again, the phone calls were sort of almost a subset, but it was orientated around all these other things that you could do, and that large screen experience with that single button on the front, the controls on the side, obviously, but that single button on the front really, obviously, was a massive reset for the industry.
I want to stay with Nokia. So what you're saying about the devices all come out differently. We used to joke that look, Nokia's launched another device, and the answer to that was, you mean another device? Because it was about the eighth for the year, and it was only February. You know, and they were really experimenting, gaming devices with the N-Gage, the flip phone,
Yeah.
the banana that they used in the Matrix. Actually, that
Yep.
was
Yep.
the 7110.
7110. Yep.
They had lots of different devices. What I said years ago, and I still believe I'm right. If Nokia had adopted Android when it started and given that OV store a kick to the curb, they would
Hmm.
still be the biggest handset manufacturer in the world today with the biggest user base. They fought and fought and fought to keep Symbian going,
Yeah.
and the devices were brilliant. Their build quality was excellent. No one questioned the build
Yes,
quality of a Nokia device.
100%. Yeah.
It was reliable. The service was good. They already understood the concept of apps. OV Store had been around for a lot longer than
Hmm.
Apple Store, and of course we didn't have anything else.
And
Um,
Palm and
Palm, all of that
all
all
the
failed.
apps that you could put on. Yeah.
And ironically, they got acquired by Microsoft and then launched an Android phone after trying to do that terrible Windows mobile thing. I mean, they just actually
Hmm.
pushed themselves right down into, non-relevance. But I would have moved to an Android phone in the early days before becoming iPhone focused and dedicated if that had been an Android device, because it would have given you the experience that you're seeing on the screen with all beautiful apps, well designed, clean, because that's what Nokia was always about. Was everything was
Yeah.
clean, and they just fought too long for Symbian. From there, it was just a sad
Yeah.
story.
I think Symbian was a really interesting experience, and then there was Migo as well, right at the very end, and
Yep.
there were some really smart people working on that. But my feeling was that despite whatever was going on there, it sort of had to go through a lot of layers of bureaucracy and politics within the organization that meant that it didn't really come to life. Where the iPhone sort of drove home the user experience as its differentiator, and because of that, and
Do
with
you
Steve Jobs obviously pointing it in that direction, that was a significant advantage.
do you know what killed Migo? There was one thing that killed Migo's success,
I don't
and that was that
remember.
WhatsApp would not write a version for Migo. The
Oh,
whole African
really?
market was using it. Was called the Nokia N9, if I stand corrected,
Hmm.
which was basically the disruptive phone that was going to launch the Nokia N95, which is their first Windows phone.
Hmm.
Um, and the camera was actually down at the bottom, not at the top. So it was nice when you're holding it. It was an upshot. The phone
Yeah.
was beautiful. I've still got one. But the problem was you could not get WhatsApp, and at that day and age, India and Africa were living on WhatsApp. WeChat was starting to become a thing. It was a discussion of some app that was used in China, but WhatsApp was just growing furiously. And the developers refused to make a version for Migo because their resources were dedicated to iOS and Android.
Yeah.
But
Right.
if they had made a version, it would be a very different landscape today because you've got a couple of billion people that would have adopted that device and the open platform that it came with. Things might have changed. So again, they got it wrong. They
Yeah,
backed the wrong pony.
and obviously going down the Microsoft path, and Windows Mobile had a lot of interesting aspects to it, but it certainly didn't save Nokia, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That was
What
the whole
other
burning platform email,
wonderful
wasn't it?
it was terrible. I hated Windows
Mm.
Mobile. What other nice screenshots have you got on there for us?
I think the only other one I've got is just comparing, I suppose, what the original iPhone screen looked like compared to today's iPhone screen, and the
Wow.
size and the resolution, and it's hilarious how different these devices are now. And obviously, for a long time, Apple sort of very much focused on the smaller screen devices, and it was the Samsungs of the world, etc., that were driving those larger screens. But they've certainly come around to it, and we'll
Yeah.
obviously in the next couple of weeks we'll hear more about the new devices from Apple. We expect.
What's your prediction there, Ollie? I mean, obviously there'll be a 5G. There has to be.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I get the benefits of 5G. I think specifically for some of the AR stuff, I think it's going to be useful. But I certainly wasn't worried that it didn't have it last year. I wouldn't even be worried. I think that 5G is not on it this year, but it certainly sounds like it is. So I don't think that's an issue anyway. But I think there'll be a bit of an evolution. Hopefully, we'll get the LiDAR on the iPhone, and I think that for AR will really sort of boost things. It's been fascinating playing around with the iPad with LiDAR and really sort of seeing how much better, how faster and more accurate and precise the AR experiences are with the iPad Pro. So I think that will come to the iPhone, and I think that'll be a big driver for AR content and experiences for the
What
general consumer. That will sort of bring that to life a bit more.
What's your feeling on shape? Do you think we'll still see these rounded edges that we have on the current one, or do you think we go back to that? I'm going to say iPad Pro. That's probably the
Yeah,
easiest way of describing it. That very straight, like the iPhone 4.
Yeah, the
That,
4.
you know,
Yeah, the 4. And I think that's a beautiful classic design. I really like it. I don't like the rounded corners, though. That said, the thing that I don't like about the iPad Pro now compared to some of the early ones is you do have that sharpness, and because of the evenness across the device, instead of the rounded corner, which sort of graduated a bit more, it does feel sort of thicker. So it's kind of interesting.
yeah.
Go to back to the flat edge with the next version. So iPhone 12, we'll see. It'll be exciting
Cool.
times.
No, it sounds good. Well, it's definitely a walk down memory lane there. That's for sure. I was like, I've said to people a few times, it actually makes a phone call as well. You don't have to just text or, you know. And the weirdest thing, especially with the new generation, is they have all these apps that they call through. So like they'll go into Discord or they'll go into WhatsApp or whatever, and they call through there. And I'm like, in Australia, for example, I mean, it's different all over the world, but here in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
our calls are free and our text is free. But anything data centric we pay for. But the youth will
Mm-hmm.
still jump on their phone and go onto like WhatsApp or FaceTime or something and make a data call as opposed to a phone call, which is free. It's
Yeah.
just different how the mindset goes. I remember like, don't spend any money on data; it's going to cost a fortune. Or don't make a phone call; you're going to pay per minute or per second.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And the data cost used to be insane, right? And now
I
you get
know.
100 gig with your monthly plan, and it's nothing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I have to ask you a question. How's the
Sure.
sound been for you on this call? Because normally I use a Rode microphone. You say thumbs up. I, I actually demoed
Yeah.
this headset last week, and I gave myself a challenge that I would do a show without my Rode
Yeah, I listen.
and with the boom mic.
Mm-hmm.
You say it's been all right. I can't hear. I'm in noise cancelling mode. But yeah,
Yeah.
I actually reviewed this last week, and I said to myself, I'm going to actually see if I can because it has the dedicated link to my MacBook, so the pairing is
Mm-hmm.
automatic. The speed should be there. I wasn't going to rely on Bluetooth or because that's why I've always used a wire
Yeah.
just to run the video. Okay, interesting.
No, it's been gold.
Mate,
And in fact, a couple of times previously we've chatted, and I have had for some reason a little bit of static, or a bit of stuttering sometimes. But on this call, I haven't heard any of it, so might even be
oh,
better.
very interesting. Yeah, well, there we go. Ollie, thank you. Tell us where do
Been a
people
pleasure. Thanks
find
for
you?
tuning.
What's the website? What's the Twitter handle? Where do we
Oliver
get hold of you?
W is the Twitter handle, is probably the best, or on LinkedIn. My company is Mobile Experience, so we're mobileexperience.com.au. But like all good what are they, shoemakers, we certainly haven't looked at the website for a very long time. So apologies if you pop along to that one.
That's a
But yeah,
sign of
feel
being
free
a
to
good
reach out.
techie. No, it's a sign
Too
of being a
busy
good
to do
techie. You're
so.
too busy doing everyone else's. That's my argument. Mate, it's been
Well, thanks for
awesome.
the opportunity, bro.
Well, we lost. I saw I got you back. You froze for a second there, but we'll
Sorry,
catch up again offline. Chris, thanks for the questions, mate, and we need to catch up. The only time I get to catch up is chirping me about haircuts and that online. So there's a challenge for you, mate. Reach out. Let's have a beer. That's it. So for this week, until next time, keep your screens clean and your knobs shiny.